Greetings, Space Tales enthusiasts. Welcome to an all-new expedition into the realm of science fiction. Should our videos bring you enjoyment, please consider subscribing to our channel, giving the video a like, and tapping the join button to unlock exclusive privileges. Let us then embark on a voyage where the boundaries of your imagination will be expanded, reaching new heights. Lieutenant James Carter attempted to mask a visible shiver as the alien Empress's gaze, piercing in its intensity, swept over him, leaving him exposed from across the bustling assembly hall on the war-torn human colony of Vesper. The seasoned officer held himself with utmost rigidity, at perfect attention. Every muscle was strained with tension, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He meticulously surveyed the surroundings, brimming with human and Zenui dignitaries. James's fingers twitched, drawing close to his pulse rifle, primed to activate at the slightest threat toward the human delegation. As an elite operative within the Earth Defense Force, his core objective was to safeguard humanity's best interests. This goal was central during these delicate diplomatic talks, devised to bring the long-running galactic war to an end. The very survival of humankind teetered in the balance. Failure meant their eventual annihilation, brought on by the cruel hands of the Zenui. A sudden quiet descended upon the chamber as the doors slid open, revealing the smooth, scaled form of Empress Leora, gracefully gliding into the hall. Her shimmering robes flowed like liquid starlight, her captivating emerald eyes meeting James's from across the room, causing his heart to pound furiously within his chest. A primal, intense attraction consumed him, shaking his disciplined composure. The Empress seemed to waver momentarily under his intense scrutiny, her regal posture faltering briefly before she regained her composure, lifting her chin and continuing her regal march to unite with the other alien representatives. James's commander gestured subtly, signaling for him to track the Empress's every move, wary of Zenui deceit. While following Leora like a hawk, James sensed the inevitable in the magnetic pull drawing them closer, a mutual attraction fiercer and more destructive than any conflict. Unknown to the assembled figures striving for peace, a concealed and dark cabal of ancient forces plotted to undermine the alliance negotiations and push the Vesper colony into pure chaos. On the front lines of this upcoming conflict, James and Leora would discover far more at stake than just the future of their respective peoples. They would be forced to confront the raw, powerful desire threatening to consume them both, as well as the immense price of succumbing to their forbidden passion. In the days following the tense encounter at the diplomatic summit, a lingering, heavy silence enveloped the human command center located on Vesper. Empress Leora remained on the colony to keep the talks going, and much to James's disbelief, he was assigned to her personal security detail. As he shadowed the Zenui monarch through the stark corridors of the compound, James fought to reconcile his innate distrust of her race with the undeniable appeal he felt toward Leora herself. Every unintentional brush of their bodies in close quarters unleashed sparks across his skin, igniting the recollection of that first charged moment when their eyes met, back in the crowded assembly hall. Late one evening, following a particularly grueling day of diplomatic struggles, James escorted Leora back to her private quarters. The silence, heavy with unspoken tension, stretched between them. As they navigated through the intricate hallways, just as they approached the entrance to her rooms, a sudden explosion shook the entire structure to its foundations. The floor tilted beneath them, nearly sending them off balance. Alarms blared and soldiers moved quickly past them, as if in a churning ocean of absolute chaos. But all James could focus on was the warm touch of Leora's body pressed against his. As he instinctively shielded her from the surrounding bedlam, fearing an assassination attempt, he quickly ushered her into a narrow maintenance shaft, sealing the hatch tightly behind them. In the compact darkness of the tunnel, illuminated only by the eerie red glow of emergency lights, James became acutely aware of Leora's close presence. The heat she exuded in the small space dividing them made his heart race and beat like a war drum as adrenaline from their perilous close call swirled within, blending with a much more dangerous thrum of uninhibited desire. "I believe we are safe for now," he managed to say, his voice rougher than intended. Leora turned to face him, her eyes shimmering in the low light. "Thanks to you," she said softly, lifting her hand to rest on his chest in a gesture of heartfelt gratitude. The simple touch was his undoing, and with a deep, frustrated groan, James cupped Leora's face in his hardened palms and claimed her lips in a fiery, passionate kiss. She succumbed to his advances immediately, her lithe form melding with the hardened strength of his battle-forged body as if they were two halves of one whole. All rational thought escaped his control as his consciousness was burned away by the intensity raging between them. A descending whistle, accompanied by a nearby blast, abruptly extinguished the flames. They pulled apart, chests heaving, staring at each other in mutual, shocked silence as the reality of what they had done washed over them. Shame chased an entirely different kind of heat through James's veins. He had let his guard down, allowing the enemy to compromise him. It could never happen again. Without uttering a word, he turned and led them deeper into the tunnel, with Leora following at his heels. As they negotiated the bends and turns of the maintenance system, James tried to keep his thoughts focused on getting them to safety, on rallying with the colony's defense forces. But despite his best efforts, he was powerless to stop his mind from constantly replaying the soul-shattering kiss time after time. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into the hollowed-out shell of the colony's marketplace. Debris and scorch marks littered the once bustling plaza, a testament to the utter brutality of the assault. Flames still flickered within the skeletal remains of vendor stalls as they carefully walked through the devastation. Leora paused, tilting her head as though she were listening. Without warning, she veered off to the left, heedless of James's shouts of protest. He sprinted after her, his pulse rifle prepared, his senses on high alert, seeking signs of another attack. When he caught up to the Empress, she was kneeling near a collapsed kiosk, desperately attempting to shift a substantial metal beam. James started to pull her to her feet, attempting to remind her that they needed to keep moving. But then he heard it. A child's terrified whimpers emanating from underneath the wreckage. Before he could react, Leora had wrenched the beam aside and crept into the small space, emerging moments later holding a young human girl close to her chest. The child's leg was twisted at a clearly unnatural angle, and tears streamed through the dirt coating her face, but she clung to the Zinui Empress as though she were a lifeline. James stared at the unbelievable sight before him, a long-held conviction shifting deep inside his chest. He had always believed the Zenui to be a cold, cruel race, utterly incapable of compassion, and yet there was Leora, tenderly soothing a wounded human child as though she were one of her own. In that moment he saw a glimpse of a very different future, one where their two peoples learned to see the person, not only the enemy, one where they worked collaboratively to create rather than destroy. It was a fragile hope, as tenuous as a single flickering candle flame, but it was a start. Together, the Empress and the soldier walked through the debris-strewn streets, the injured girl an insecure and tenuous link between them. Whatever the next day might bring, be it a tentative alliance or a return to the bloodshed and suspicion that had defined their shared history, for tonight they had forged the very first link in a chain that might one day bind their worlds together, in peace. The comparative tranquility in the wake of the attack was broken just days later when James entered the command center, his teeth grinding together as he bore the accusatory glares from his fellow officers. Captain Reyes's voice cut through the tension, piercing like a knife. "Carter, a word." James's stomach lurched. "Sir?" "I witnessed the Empress's actions during the attack," Reyes stated. "She saved a human child, which could have been a calculated ploy to deflect suspicion." I don't care what you think you saw. You will carry out this investigation thoroughly and without bias. Is that clear? Yes, sir, James responded, his voice stiff. Over the grueling days that followed, James found himself caught in an agonizing, relentless dance with Leora. He meticulously searched through her private quarters, interrogated her for hours on end, all while fighting the electrical current that seemed to arc between them with every exchanged glance or casual instance of skin contact. During a particularly heated interrogation, Leora leaned forward, her emerald eyes boring into his. Why are you doing this, James? You know I am not responsible. Before he could form a response, a young lieutenant entered the room suddenly, saying, Sir, we have discovered something. James's blood ran cold as he examined the damning evidence pulled from a secret compartment. Hidden within Leora's private quarters, comprehensive schematics of the colony's defenses, traces of explosive residue on a set of tools. Within hours, Leora was confined to a high-security cell, the threat of deportation and harsh penalties looming. But as James stared at the neatly stacked pile of incriminating items, persistent doubt gnawed at him. It was all too perfect, too convenient. That night, he made his way to the detention block, dismissing the guards with a curt nod. As the cell door slid shut behind him, Leora turned to face him, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and hurt. No, James said softly. I've come because something just doesn't add up. This evidence, it feels wrong. Leora's posture softened slightly. Because it is wrong, James. I swear to you I had nothing to do with the attack, but I fear I know who did. She moved closer, close enough that James could feel the heat radiating from her body. His willpower instantly crumbled. He drew her close to him. Their lips met in a feverish, desperate kiss. Their hands explored, charting an unfamiliar landscape. Months of pent-up desire exploded between them. James's mind raced. We must find that proof before it's too late. But how? A dangerous spark ignited in Leora's eyes. We're breaking into the Zenui compound. It was madness, yet James found himself nodding. I'll get you out of here tonight. That evening, as they slipped through the shadows of the colony, James knew he was crossing a line from which there was no return. But with Leora beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his, regret was a foreign concept. They advanced toward the Zenui compound, their hearts drumming in sync as their covert search for evidence commenced. A gnawing feeling of hurtling into a storm that would either forge an unbreakable connection between them or sever them eternally persisted in James's thoughts. His fingers danced over the console, decrypting the final layer of Zenui security protocols. His eyes widened as the files materialized on the screen, revealing the rogue faction's hidden base location. We've got them. He turned to Leora, breathless. She leaned in, her emerald eyes meticulously examining the data. The Crimson Nebula. It's perfect. The electromagnetic interference will conceal their energy signatures. A muscle twitched in James's jaw. I'm going after them. Leora gripped his arm. James, it's suicide. That nebula is a death trap for any ship, let alone a single fighter. I don't have a choice, he said, his voice low, resolute. They'll come for you again. I can't let that happen. Their eyes locked, volumes unspoken between them. Finally, Leora nodded. Then go, but come back to me. Hours later, James's stealth fighter pierced the swirling veils of the Crimson Nebula. Tendrils of cosmic dust slithered across his viewport as he plunged deeper into the roaring maelstrom. His sensors strained against the interference, searching for any trace of the enemy base. Just as frustration threatened to overcome him, a faint blip appeared on his readouts. His heart pounded. James angled toward the signal. The nebula parted, unveiling a monstrous dreadnought emerging from the cosmic mists. He circled the behemoth, hunting for a weakness. There it was, a lone shuttle docked in the central hangar. Leora had to be there. James's hands tightened on the controls. Now or never. He unleashed a barrage of decoy flares, blinding the enemy sensors. His fighter screamed toward the dreadnought, laser cannons blazing. The first salvo sheared off a massive engine, sending it spinning into the nebula's depths. Alarms blared throughout the enemy ship. James executed a series of blistering attack runs, systematically crippling the dreadnought's weapon systems. With the ship's offensive capabilities neutralized, James keyed his calm. "Leora, can you hear me?" Static crackled. "James, I knew you'd come for me." Relief surged through him at the sound of her voice. He angled toward the hangar, already plotting their escape route. Suddenly, his fighter lurched violently. A lucky shot from a damaged turret had taken out his starboard stabilizer. The hangar loomed ahead as his craft spiraled out of control. James roared in defiance, slamming the ejection lever. He rocketed free an instant before his fighter exploded in a fireball against the hangar deck. His chute deployed with a bone-jarring jolt. James hit the deck hard, rolling to his feet as armed patrols converged on his position. He dove behind the flaming wreckage of his fighter, bracing for the killing blow. Leora's imperious voice echoed across the hangar. She strode toward him, every inch the regal queen despite her captivity. With a curt gesture, she dismissed the stunned guards. Their eyes met, a maelstrom of emotion passing between them. Without a word, Leora led James to her waiting shuttle. They lifted off as chaos engulfed the crippled dreadnought behind them. Once safely beyond the nebula's reach, all pretense of control shattered. They crashed together, months of pent-up desire exploding in a frenzy of desperate kisses and exploring hands. Alien flesh and human skin met as they fervently explored each other's bodies. Afterward, they lay entangled, the weight of their actions settling over them. James traced the intricate patterns on Leora's skin, his voice a low rumble. "When this is over, we'll show them there's another way." Leora nodded solemnly, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. The path ahead was fraught with danger, the consequences of their forbidden union still unknown. As they guided the shuttle toward the edge of Zenui space, neither could fully grasp the magnitude of what they had set in motion. Their bond had sparked a revolution, one that would soon set the galaxy ablaze with change. As they approached the edge of Zenui space, the initial euphoria of their escape began to fade, replaced by the weight of reality. James noticed Leora growing distant, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "What's troubling you?" he asked, reaching for her hand. "We'll find a way," he insisted. But doubt nagged at him. Leora stood abruptly. "I have a plan. There's vital intelligence about the conspiracy that needs to be delivered. We'll arrange peace talks as cover." James nodded, eager to take action. But as they neared the designated coordinates, unease pricked along his spine. The Zenui delegation ships materialized, sleek and menacing. "Something's wrong," he muttered, reaching for the controls. Too late. Tractor beams locked onto their shuttle, dragging them into the hangar bay of the lead vessel. Armed guards swarmed the shuttle. James turned to Leora, betrayal etched across his features. "You set me up." He struggled as the guards hauled him away. Leora's anguished expression seared into his memory. Days blurred together in his cell. Interrogators relentlessly probed about the conspiracy. James revealed fragments of truth, hints about the rogue faction's plans to escalate the war. Then came the public spectacle. They dragged him before the cameras, determined to break him completely. The first lash of the energy whip tore a scream from his throat. Through the haze of agony, he glimpsed Leora's horrified face in the crowd. Abruptly, the torture ceased. Alarms blared as Leora herself burst into the chamber, blaster in hand. "This ends now," she snarled, freeing James from his restraints. But their reunion was short-lived as they fled down twisting corridors. A stun blast caught Leora in the back. She crumpled. Guards swarmed around her. Agonized, he obeyed, escaping in the chaos. Within hours, a joint human Zenui strike force assaulted the conspirator stronghold. James led the charge, cutting a path straight to Leora's cell. When their eyes met, a wordless understanding passed between them. He helped her to her feet, pulling her close. Despite everything, I couldn't leave you behind. Together they pushed onward, determined to end the conflict once and for all. As the dust settled on their daring rescue, James and Leora found themselves thrust into a spotlight neither had anticipated. The journey back to Vesper Colony was tense, filled with furtive glances and hushed conversations. When they finally landed, a cacophony of voices greeted them, some cheering, others hurling accusations. James instinctively moved closer to her, his hand brushing hers. The simple gesture sent ripples through the crowd. In the days that followed, they were paraded before committees and councils, recounting their harrowing ordeal and the conspiracy they'd uncovered. But for every person who saw their bond as a beacon of hope, another viewed it as an abomination. Late one night, Leora paced their secure quarters, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with agitation. "This can't go on, James. They'll tear us apart." He watched her, feeling the weight of their impossible situation. "What do you suggest?" She turned to him, her emerald eyes blazing with determination. "There's a way, an ancient ritual, long forgotten by most of my people. It would join us permanently." James's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, join us?" Leora explained the intricacies of the binding ritual, her words painting a picture of transcendence and unity that both thrilled and terrified him. Days passed as James grappled with the decision. The pressure mounted as extremists from both sides made increasingly bold moves against them. Finally, in the dim light of their room, he met Leora's gaze. "Let's do it." The escape from Vesper was fraught with danger. They slipped past security checkpoints, hearts pounding as alarms blared in the distance. Leora piloted their stolen shuttle with preternatural skill, weaving through asteroid fields until the massive silhouette of an ancient Zenui temple ship loomed before them. Inside, the air thrummed with latent energy. Leora led James through winding corridors to a chamber bathed in ethereal light. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. They began the ritual, following steps etched into the very walls of the ship. As the final incantation left their lips, the world exploded into sensory overload. Pain unlike anything James had ever experienced tore through him. He felt his body stretching, twisting, reshaping itself at the molecular level. Beside him, Leora writhed in similar agony. Their minds collided, memories and emotions intertwining, until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. In that moment of purest connection, James understood the true depth of Leora's love for him and his for her. An eternity later, the maelstrom subsided. James blinked, his new eyes adjusting to the light. He looked down at his transformed body, marveling at the swirling bioluminescent patterns that now adorned his muscular frame. Leora stood before him, her lithe form now augmented with unmistakably human characteristics. Their eyes met, and a spark of shared consciousness passed between them. "It worked," she breathed, her voice resonating in both their minds as one. They turned to face the viewport, gazing out at the stars that suddenly seemed full of new possibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They were a living symbol of the potential for their species' cooperation. James and Leora's elation after their successful transformation was short-lived. Mere days after they returned to Vesper Colony, the first attempt on their lives came, a plasma grenade hurled through their quarters window. Only their heightened reflexes kept them alive. The attacks then escalated. Snipers targeted them during public appearances, and saboteurs infiltrated their security systems. Each time they narrowly escaped, but innocent bystanders weren't so lucky. After a brutal attack left a dozen colonists dead, James pulled Leora close. "We can't stay here. We're putting everyone at risk." She nodded gravely. "I know where we can go." Under the cover of night, they fled, boarding an ancient Zenui dreadnought that had slumbered for centuries. As they activated its systems, Leora's eyes widened. "James, look at this," she said, pointing to a holographic display. Schematics for long-lost Zenui technology scrolled past Leora's fingers as she expertly navigated the controls, decrypting file after file. "It's incredible," she breathed. "Our ancestors knew far more about interspecies biology than we ever imagined." James leaned in, studying the complex diagrams. "Is that what I think it is?" Leora nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsating with excitement. "A way for us to have children, true hybrids." The procedures outlined were daunting, requiring genetic manipulation and physiological reconfiguration beyond anything they had encountered. James hesitated, then steeled himself. "We have to try. It's the only way to prove our peoples can truly unite." The trials pushed them to their limits. James watched in horror as Leora's body twisted during the final metamorphic wave, her screams echoing through the ship's cavernous halls. When she finally emerged, trembling and glistening with sweat, her new form left no doubt. She could bear his child. News of their success spread like wildfire, igniting a powder keg of tension throughout the colony. Extremists on both sides saw the impending birth as an unbearable threat to their way of life. As Leora entered her fertile period, alarms blared throughout the dreadnought. Security feeds showed a swarm of assault craft converging on their position. They launched into space, accompanied by a small fleet of supporters. Plasma bolts streaked past the viewport as enemy ships gave chase. Leora doubled over, crying out in pain. "James, it's starting!" He took the controls, executing evasive maneuvers while Leora fought through contractions, her body shifting and pulsing with otherworldly energies as the hybrid birth pushed her new physiology to its breaking point. Hours melted into a blur of alarms, weapon fire, and Leora's agonized screams. Just as their shields were about to fail, she gave a final triumphant cry. James turned, his breath catching at the sight of two tiny forms cradled in Leora's arms. The infant's skin shimmered with swirling patterns of light, a mesmerizing blend of human and Zenui characteristics. As they neared Sanctuary World, a message crackled over the comms. "We've heard the news. Your children are welcome here." The Sanctuary World of Valyria greeted James and Leora with open arms. Lush vegetation and crystalline lakes stretched as far as the eye could see, providing a peaceful backdrop for their new life. In the first months after their arrival, the couple poured their energy into creating a home for their hybrid twins. James marveled at the infants' rapid development, their skin shifting with ever-changing patterns of light, a mesmerizing dance of human and Zenui genetics. He often caught Leora gazing at them with a mix of wonder and fierce protectiveness. "They're perfect," she whispered one night, cradling both babies to her chest. James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "They're the future, the one we fought for." But their peace was short-lived. The first attack came without warning, a series of explosions that rocked the outskirts of the colony. James and Leora sprang into action, coordinating with local security forces to repel the insurgents. As days turned to weeks, the raids grew bolder. James paced their home, tension coiled in every muscle. "We can't keep living like this," he growled. A deafening blast cut him off. The door to their dwelling burst inward, revealing a swarm of masked figures. James dove for the twins' room while Leora unleashed a barrage of defensive fire. The next moments passed in a haze of smoke and plasma bolts. James emerged with the crying infants to find Leora slumped against the wall, blood seeping from multiple wounds, her eyes fluttering open, focusing on the babies with agonizing effort. Get them out, she rasped. Keep them safe. James's heart shattered, but he nodded, knowing she was right. With a final desperate look, he fled with the twins, leaving Leora behind to cover their escape. James and the twins emerged on a barren, windswept plain. Orion stumbled, his newly forged body still adjusting to its enhanced abilities. Astra steadied him, her eyes scanning the desolate horizon. They immediately started work, using their formidable powers to carve a sanctuary out of the planet's harsh elements. Days on bedrock merged into weeks. They built a hidden redoubt, a bastion against the galaxy's unending hostility. Astra's eyes suddenly flared, glowing with an otherworldly luminosity. "Death," she whispered. "So much death." Orion nodded, his skin shifting with agitation. "We see fleets gathering, Dad. Armies are mobilizing. They're coming for us, for everything we represent." James clenched his fist. It was naive to think they'd found peace. "We'll move again, find somewhere even more remote." "No," Astra interrupted, her voice unnaturally calm. "Running won't stop what's coming. We need to act first." The twins unfurled their plan, referencing ancient star charts and speaking of weapons beyond comprehension. James listened, a rising unease warring with pride. "This weaponsmith citadel," he said slowly. "Are you certain it exists?" Orion nodded. "The Zenui maps are clear. It's a forge of cosmic power, capable of creating armaments that could shatter worlds or save them." Astra added, "If we control it first, we can force both sides to the negotiating table. It's our only chance for lasting peace." James opened his mouth to object, but a priority alert blazed across their communications array. His blood ran cold as he processed the incoming data. "Confirmed sightings of a massive joint fleet," he reported grimly. "Human and Zenui extremists working together. They found us." The twins exchanged a look, radiating relentless drive. "We're out of time," Orion said. James closed his eyes, weighing the enormity of their decision. When he opened them, his children stood before him in gleaming battle suits, their forms pulsing with barely contained energy. "Let's go," he said simply. They boarded their stealth craft, plotting a course for the fabled citadel. As they hurtled through the void, James studied his offspring. Their faces were masks of concentration, but he saw glimpses of fear in their eyes, premonitions of the trials ahead. The weaponsmith citadel loomed before them, a sprawling construct of impossible geometries. As they approached, reality itself seemed to warp and bend. James felt his sanity threaten to unravel as they navigated the non-Euclidean passageways. At last, they reached the core, a cavernous chamber housing machinery beyond comprehension. The twins moved with purpose, interfacing with control systems that responded to their hybrid physiology. "We've started the forging process," Astra announced, her voice echoing strangely. "But it will take time." A deafening explosion cut her off. The chamber shuddered violently as alarms blared. "They're here," Orion growled, his skin crackling with pent-up energy. James unholstered his weapon. The familiar weight grounded him amid the surreal chaos. "How long do you need?" "Longer than we have," Astra replied grimly. As if in answer, the far wall disintegrated in a hail of plasma fire. Enemy troops poured through the breach, a nightmarish amalgamation of human and Zenui physiology, twisted by hate. James opened fire, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to drop targets with inhuman precision. The twins unleashed their powers, warping gravity and shredding matter on a subatomic level. But for every foe they felled, two more took its place. James felt himself being driven back, the relentless tide pushing them away from the crucible of creation they'd worked so hard to activate. "We can't hold them," he shouted over the din of battle. "No!" Orion cried, realizing their intent, but it was too late. Astra and Orion's forms began to dissolve, merging with the cosmic energies of the weapon itself. Their screams of agony and triumph reverberated through James's very soul as reality trembled on the edge of oblivion. A blinding light erupted from the forge's core. James instinctively shielded his eyes, his last coherent thought a prayer that his children's sacrifice would not be in vain. When the searing radiance faded, James found himself adrift in a void of ash and devastation. Fragments of worlds and starships drifted past his battered escape pod. He stared numbly at the cosmic carnage, his mind struggling to process the scale of destruction. A warning chime snapped him from his reverie. Enemy boarding craft were closing in. With trembling hands, James reached for a hidden compartment, extracting a small, gleaming vial. Inside lay the distilled essence of his children's hybrid genome, a final hope for the future they dreamed of. As the sound of cutting torches reached his ears, James clutched the vial to his chest and steeled himself for what was to come. He would endure whatever horrors awaited him at the hands of his captors. For as long as he drew breath, the promise of a united galaxy would live on.